This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Mozambique braces for heavy rains and flooding as tropic storm Eloise slams into its coastline. A shot in the arm, WHO secures 40 million COVID-19 vaccine doses for poor and middle-income countries. And the impeachment trial of former US President Donald Trump delayed until February. Hello and welcome to Africa Live on CGTN. I'm Mahia Mutua in Nairobi. Also coming up, in business, annual inflation in Nigeria rose in December last year to the highest rate in 3 years. And in sports, IOC President Thomas Bach insists the delayed Tokyo 20 Games will run as scheduled. Tropical storm Eloise has made landfall in Mozambique, pummeling the coastline with strong winds and rainfall. The UN's humanitarian agency OCHA reports that the storm earlier hit Madagascar, where it killed 1 person and affected more than 1,000 people. The storm is expected to cause widespread flooding as it intensifies into a tropical cyclone. After hitting land, Eloise is forecast to lose strength as it travels inland to southern Zimbabwe, eastern South Africa, and eastern Botswana. 2 years ago, Cyclone Idai devastated Beira, displacing thousands of residents and killing over 1,000 people across Mozambique, Malawi, and Zimbabwe. Now, the World Health Organization says it has reached an agreement with Pfizer for 40 million doses of its vaccine against COVID-19. Poor and lower middle-income countries will receive the vaccine doses under the COVAX initiative starting February. The COVAX program is co-led by the World Health Organization and looks to ensure equitable distribution of COVID-19 vaccines.
Today, I'm glad to announce that COVAX has signed an agreement with Pfizer-BioNTech for up to 40 million doses of its vaccine. Additionally, pending WHO emergency use listing, we expect almost 150 million doses of the AstraZeneca Oxford vaccine to be available for distribution by COVAX in the first quarter of this year. Together, these announcements mean COVAX could begin delivering doses in February, provided we can finalize a supply agreement for the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine and emergency use listing for the AstraZeneca Oxford vaccine. COVAX is on track to deliver 2 billion doses by the end of this year.
Meanwhile, the Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention says the African Medical Supplies Platform is working to get enough vaccines to the continent as earlier planned. So far, 7 countries are using it, and the Africa CDC has started the pre-ordering process for its member states. Here is CGTN's Girum Chala with more on that story now.
Africa has already announced it's preparing to purchase 270 million doses of vaccines, and that process is now being coordinated by the Africa CDC under what is known as the Continental Medical Supplies Platform. John Nkengasong, the Africa CDC Director General, says all is going according to plan.
I'm pleased to announce that the pre-order process has started with member states. I think several member states, I can't give you the exact number because they keep changing, are now engaged with a platform that is the African Medical Supply Platform to place their orders.
Many African countries will go for the Pfizer vaccine, which requires a minus 70 degrees Celsius of storage. So going ahead, the Africa CDC has suggested how member states should handle the vaccination transportation and administration process with an example.
If one was to make available the Pfizer vaccine to me and said, administer it in Ethiopia, what will I do? I mean, I'll do the simple things. But one, all we need to do is to get the vaccines to the port the airport in Addis Ababa. And Ethiopian Airlines, Kenya Airlines, and others are now equipped to transport vaccines with ultra cold chain requirement. Then from there, the second thing you do is to create a vaccination coordinating unit at the Ethiopian Public Health Institute, where they already have cold chains there. They have series of -70s there. They can and liquid nitrogen tanks. So that shouldn't be a problem. So I take my vaccines from the airport, store them at the EPHI, the Ethiopian Public Health Institute. The third thing we need to do now will be to create vaccination points across Addis Ababa.
Dr. Nkenga Song says that if the training of health workers on vaccine administration and public mobilization can be implemented well, this can guarantee a successful vaccination of millions in a mega city within a short period. In Africa, 3.3 million COVID-19 cases have been reported so far. That is 3.5% of the total cases reported globally. Of that number, 83% have recovered, and 81,000 COVID-19 related deaths have been reported across the continent. That is about 4% of deaths reported globally. Still, experts say Africa must continue its works of prevention and management until it comfortably secures enough vaccinations. Group Data CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Let's now turn to Morocco, which has received 2 million doses of AstraZeneca's COVID-19 vaccine. The country received the shipment on Friday. It is rolling out a nationwide free immunization program. The campaign will start next week. Health workers, public authorities, teachers, and the elderly will receive priority. Around 3,000 vaccine locations have been set up. In total, Morocco has ordered 66 million doses of various COVID-19 vaccines. Meanwhile, Uganda is on high alert after 2 cases of the new coronavirus variant first seen in South Africa were identified in Kenya. Kenya's health ministry says the 2 cases showed mild symptoms of the COVID-19 strain and have since left the country. The 2 men are foreigners, but their nationalities were not mentioned. Isabel Nakiria now reports.
Uganda is strengthening measures to prevent any possible spread of the new coronavirus variant, which has already been recorded in neighboring Kenya. The new variant that was first seen in South Africa is said to be more easily transmissible. It's different from the strain that was discovered in the UK in December. Scientists in Uganda say no new coronavirus variant has been detected in the country yet, but caution is being taken.
We are doing a lot of work on sequencing of the virus, and we have done it from the very beginning to see what type of virus we have, and all our sequences have been deposited in the international database and they are accessible anywhere. So far we have sequenced about 140 viruses in Uganda. We have not yet identified that new variant.
Uganda is already carrying out tests for the new variant on travelers from the UK and South Africa. Intensive care units in Uganda are already stretched, and any new threats from a neighboring country could pose serious threats.
We are increasing our efforts so that in case we pick any of these variants, we take measures. The good thing is that so far the prevention measures still remain the same. We just need to continue with our prevention measures.
Uganda maintains mandatory mask wearing, social distancing and hand washing as preventive methods. The UK has banned travellers from 11 southern African countries to prevent the spread of the new variant identified in South Africa. Uganda says it's not made any decision yet to introduce travel restrictions. Isabel Nakiria, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
Experts have already said a mutant coronavirus strain found in the UK late last year is more contagious than previous variants. Now the government says it could be more deadly as well. CGTN's Guy Henderson has the latest from London.
All parts of the UK are currently in lockdown as they struggle to contain a new variant of the coronavirus, which originated in the southeast of England late last year. The latest government figures, though, show that the reproduction rate across the UK as a whole has fallen now to between 0.8 and 1. That means that the virus is no longer spreading. It suggests, of course, then that the lockdown measures are working. But officials are warning that the number of new cases remains very, very high. And the UK Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, says that the proportion of people who test positive and then go on, sadly, to die has slightly increased.
So I must tell you this afternoon that we've been informed today that in addition to spreading more quickly, it also now appears that there is some evidence that the new variant, the variant that was first identified in London and the South East, may be associated with a higher degree of mortality.
UK government scientists say they're more concerned still by the potential entry of any new vaccine-resistant strains to the UK from other parts of the world. Prime Minister Johnson wouldn't rule out in that press conference the possibility of taking further actions to secure the UK borders. We know that there has already been a high-level discussion about the possibility of a complete border closure. For now, though, the Prime Minister says the measures that are already in place are sufficient. Any less, though, he says, is out of the question at the moment. And that means that in England, at least, the indefinite lockdown looks set to continue. Guy Henderson, CGTN, London.
Well, the Chinese mainland has reported 107 new coronavirus infections. Among them, 90 are local transmissions. The northeastern province of Heilongjiang reported the highest number with 56 infections. Of the other domestic cases, 15 are in Hebei, 13 in Jilin, 3 in Beijing and 3 in Shanghai. Authorities also registered imported cases in 6 different areas, including Shanghai and Shanxi. Now, the Ugandan army contingent under the African Union mission in Somalia is reporting that it has killed at least 189 Al-Shabaab fighters. It would be the biggest ever since it deployed in Somalia. A spokesperson said that the militants were killed when the army raided Al-Shabaab hideouts in the Sigale village, that's 100 kilometers southwest of the Somali capital, Mogadishu. The commander of the Ugandan troops in Somalia, Brigadier General Don William Nabassa, said his forces didn't suffer any losses or injuries. For more on this story now, we're joined by Abdulaziz Bilo in Mogadishu. Abdulaziz, what more details can you give us about this attack at this time?
Well, Mahia, the Somali government is yet to comment on this operation that was carried out by the Ugandan contingent that is part of the African Union mission to Somalia, AMISOM. But what we know so far is, according to the spokesperson of the Uganda's military, says that the attack took place on Friday morning, that is yesterday, in Lower Shabelle. Now, Lower Shabelle region has long been considered the epicenter of the conflict in southern Somalia, and it's been the place where Al-Shabaab has had more reinforcement and attacking African Union troops as well as the Somali government. And also, it's the only place where Al-Shabaab uses to launch attacks and then bring the trucks and huge car bombs to attack here in Mogadishu. So the attack, according to the Ugandan army spokesperson, took place on Friday in a place where Al-Shabaab were gathering. More than 189 were killed, according to the Ugandan army spokesperson. Now, the interesting part in that attack is the fact that Ugandan troops say that the attack was carried out using ground and air assault. Now, there are only 2 countries that have previously had aerial capability in Somalia. That is the Kenya Defense Forces, KDF, who operate in Sector 2, that is the regions that border Somalia and Kenya, as well as the US forces under the Africa Command that carries out drone strikes against Al-Shabaab targets. So this, if confirmed, will be a big boost for the Ugandan troops who've suffered heavy casualties in the Lower Shabelle region in areas like Janale, where Al-Shabaab has attacked Ugandan forces in the past. So this will definitely be a big news for authorities in Somalia. The African Union mission is yet also to issue a statement on that attack, but if confirmed, it will be the biggest news of AMISOM troops in Somalia.
And Abdulaziz, as we know, AMISOM forces have been battling with Al-Shabaab for years now. What is the significance now of this latest development?
Well, AMISOM has been effective in Somalia since 2007 and has turned the tide against Africa's dreaded militant group over the years. Before AMISOM came to Somalia, virtually the country was almost under the control of the militant group Al-Shabaab, with deadly attacks, and the 70% of the capital was also under the militant group's control. But over the years, the struggle that AMISOM forces have put has changed the tide against the group. It has allowed the Somali government to flex its muscles and create regional administrations in areas where it was very hard for the Somali government to create existing regional administration. So AMISOM forces have done a commendable job over the years. It has killed scores of Al-Shabaab, allowed the Somali government to also to open key roads that were blockaded by the militant group Al-Shabaab. Some airports that were non-existent back in the days have now still been reopened due to the security operations that have been carried out by the African Union troops as well as the Somali forces, especially in the Lower Shabelle region where this attack is said to have taken place. The Somali government had found it very hard to operate there. It's thick, it's made of a huge forest, it's agricultural land, it's where Al-Shabaab used as a base to attack African Union troops, and scores have been killed over the years in that area. So this attack on the Al-Shabaab will deny them the possibility of regrouping and gathering again and mounting large-scale attacks against government forces here in Somalia. It has also allowed the Somali military enough time to prepare itself in order to take over from African Union troops who are due to leave the country in the coming years, Mahia.
All right, Abdulaziz, thank you for bringing us up to speed. CGTN's Abdulaziz Bilo joining us live there from Mogadishu in Somalia. Well, it's time for us to take a short breather here on Africa Live. Here's what's coming up. The impeachment trial of former U.S. President Donald Trump delayed until February.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Aden, Tunis, Cairo,
Sharia,
Juba, Johannesburg, Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. Let's turn to the United States. Donald Trump out of the White House, but not quite out of the news. The impeachment trial of the former U.S. president is set to begin the week of February the 8th. Democrats agreed to delay the trial as requested by members of Trump's Republican Party. He is accused of inciting the deadly riot at the Capitol building this month. Sean Calebs tells us more.
You can see the barricades are still up here outside the U.S. Capitol, but earlier in the day, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi made it clear Donald Trump will face a trial. She said on Monday they will pass over the charges to the Senate. He has the dubious distinction of being the only U.S. president to be impeached twice. So how will that work? Without question, the Democrats blame Trump for that insurrection. They say that his tweets and his statements really fan the flames. He said that he urges supporters to go out and fight like hell, saying they would never take back the government if they were weak. He continued to foster a lie for weeks that the election was stolen from him. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer came out and said there will be no get-out-of-jail-free card for Donald Trump.
The Senate will conduct a trial of the impeachment of Donald Trump. It will be a full trial. It will be a fair trial. But make no mistake, there will be a trial, and when that trial ends, senators will have to decide if they believe Donald John Trump incited the insurrection against the United States.
Now, the big question is, how will Republican senators react to all this? We know that earlier in the week, Mitch McConnell came out and was very critical of Trump, said that it was his lies that incited the mob that descended on the Capitol. But at the same time, McConnell was also urging the Senate to give Trump at least 2 weeks so he can build up some kind of defense against the impeachment charges. We also know that Senator Lindsey Graham has reached out to South Carolina attorney, where Graham is from, and he has agreed to represent Trump in all of this. But the bottom line is this impeachment trial is not going away. It is not a question of if it will start. So if Trump thought he could leave office, go down to Florida, be out of power, it certainly is not playing out that way. Sean Caleb's CGTN in Washington.
Now to an update on efforts to rescue 22 men trapped since an explosion at a gold mine in eastern China nearly 2 weeks ago. Rescuers say 10 men who they've made contact with by drilling a small hole are in good physical shape. The miners have been using laser pointers and megaphones to try to make contact with another group of 10 men whose fate is unclear. One of those in the group that's already been reached died of his injuries earlier this week. Rescue teams say they still need to shift 70 tons of debris to unblock a ventilation shaft so the miners can be rescued. Well, let's now head to the Democratic Republic of Congo, where the head of the UN peacekeeping mission has urged leaders to work closely with the public and neighboring countries to end conflicts in the east of the country. Leila Zerugui made the appeal during a press conference where she marked the end of her 3-year tour of duty.
UN peacekeepers conduct routine patrols in North Kivu province in eastern DRC. This area has a multitude of armed groups fighting over land, power, and the control of mineral resources. The peacekeepers have been here since 1999. Their mandate is to protect civilians, but rebel attacks have left millions dead over the past 2 decades. The outgoing head of the UN peacekeeping mission, Leila Zerogi, has called for joint efforts to end the fighting.
It's very important that we work all together on this. Congolese and neighbor and the world, helping the stability, first inside Congo, within the population, between the institution, between the Congolese and their government.
Ms. Zerogi has ended her 3-year tour of duty and will be succeeded by Bintu Keita from Guinea. Some Congolese officials feel the UN troops haven't lived up to their expectations.
MONUSCO has not been able to fulfill its mandate of protecting civilians in the DRC. Now that Madame Leila is leaving, I would like her to know that she has left an unresolved problem. There is no peace. She might even hear a report of more killings in Beni while she's on the plane back to her country.
Attacks against civilians intensified in October 2019 after the government launched an offensive against armed groups. Some security experts say previous attempts by the government to restore peace by granting amnesty to rebels haven't helped much.
Millions and millions of dollars have been spent by the government and development partners to try and end the conflict in the east, but nothing has changed. It's very sad. We need to come up with a solid mechanism to stop the violence.
Calls for the UN peacekeepers to leave the DRC have been growing in the eastern territory of Beni, following an increase of deaths of civilians. But last December, the UN Security Council extended the force's mandate for 1 year. The head of the UN peacekeeping mission is leaving the country at a time when attacks against civilians have increased significantly in the east and northeastern parts of the country. More than 1,000 people are reported to have been killed by armed groups since 2019. Security experts say the illegal exploitation of mineral and forest resources has fueled the conflict in the DRC. Chris Ochamringa, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
Well, as drought continues to ravage parts of Kenya's Rift Valley region, residents of Baringo County have taken to grazing their cows in the shallow parts of the lake. Tufts of grass nourished by the lake waters are now keeping cattle alive as locals wait for rain. CGTN's Wilkista Nyabwa has that story for us now.
The waters of Lake Baringo swirl around the cattle as they wade, making their way across. Even though this is only the shallow end, the cattle go deeper and deeper until only their heads remain above water. The lake is their new grazing ground. Every day, herders guide their animals through the water in search of grass to graze on.
Our cows can't find grass anywhere, so we started to graze them in the water.
It is a tale of two extremes. On one side, residents struggle to find pasture for their animals as a long drought ravages the fields. On the other, lakes in the region continue to swell due to climate change, claiming large tracts of land and leaving a trail of disaster. There's water everywhere now, but no pasture.
Even those who moved their cattle up the hills are suffering because those regions have dried up as well.
The tufts of grass offer temporary relief.
The grass was dislodged by water and pushed towards us. We don't know exactly where it comes from.
But the water also holds its own dangerous secrets.
There are many dangerous animals in the water. There are hippos and crocodiles, but we don't have a choice now.
The young boys who had the cattle on weekends must abandon the task on weekdays when they go to school. Kenya's short rainy season begins in March. In areas where the earth is parched, residents continue to watch the skies, waiting for the relief rain will bring. Wilkes Anyabo, CGTN.
On to South Africa now, where astronomers have discovered two new giant radio galaxies using the country's powerful Meerkat radio telescope. These galaxies are amongst the largest single objects in the universe and are thought to be quite rare. CGTN's Travers Andrews now reports.
South Africa's Meerkat telescope is one of the most powerful and sensitive radio interferometers in the world. The telescope was used by researchers to discover two new giant radio galaxies that are so big that experts say it will take 6.5 million years to travel from one end to the other.
The size of each of them is about 62 times the diameter of the Milky Way. So these are really huge, but they're actually also really faint. So their light is distributed over quite a large patch of sky. And Meerkat is actually the first of its kind that is capable of detecting galaxies that are so faint and so big, so widely spread across the sky. And this is really a first.
Radio galaxies are clouds of gas and dust that emit charges of radio light while being sucked into supermassive black holes. The discovery was made in an area of sky 4 times the size of a full moon, which leads the team to believe that radio galaxies may just be more common than previously thought. The find also gives clues on how galaxies have changed and evolved throughout cosmic history, and is a major scientific achievement.
I mean, I think that discoveries like these are always exciting, no matter where they happen in the world, but particularly the fact that they can come out of Africa now is enormous. I mean, radio astronomy in South Africa is really world leading now. It's really taken the charge. This telescope is amazing, and it's paving the way for the Square Kilometre Array telescope in the future.
For now, the discovery has been published in a peer-reviewed journal, while researchers continue to search the skies in a survey seeking even bigger radio galaxies. Researchers say the Meerkat radio telescope is perhaps the only one in the world capable of searching for such faint radio galaxies, but it's just a fraction of the type of science that can be conducted by the even more capable Square Kilometre Array telescope once it comes online in around 2027. That's Andrews, CGTN, Cape Town.
Now, the Tokyo Wearable Expo, just held in Japan, has showcased some impressive technology. But with half of the country under a state of emergency, it had fewer exhibitors than usual, with a focus on life amid the pandemic. Our correspondent Mayu Yoshida reports.
I'm here at the 7th annual Tokyo Wearable Expo, where all the latest in wearable technology is gathered here. Of course, this year focus is on the coronavirus pandemic. For those of you who are not familiar with what wearable technology is, let me give you an example. This shirt is installed with 10 sensors, and it was originally used to collect biometric data for sports. Its developers say they've adapted the technology to track COVID-19 patients in quarantine hotels. This app receives information from a heat detection sensor. It can check if people are wearing a mask, measure body temperatures, and track the movement of people to reduce crowding. It can also check if customers have stopped by the hand sanitizer station and for how long. It was originally developed 5 years ago by a joint venture between Japan's Hitachi and South Korea's LG Electronics. This year's event have been scaled down because of the pandemic. Exhibitors have shown up despite Tokyo under the state of emergency.
The pandemic initially hit our business and we were all told to work from home, but the core of our technology is tracking human movements with no contact, so we figured this could be adapted into new needs during the pandemic.
The number of exhibitors have dropped more than 80% from last year, so we're seeing fewer visitors, fewer exhibitors, and less interaction between them. Also, as part of coronavirus measures, all visitors are required to wear masks. But companies that have shown up to this exhibition say that they want to use their technology to create a safer environment. Mahia Yoshida, CGTN, Tokyo.
Well, let's get a look at your top stories this hour. The World Health Organization says it has reached an agreement with Pfizer for 40 million doses of its vaccine against COVID-19. Poor and middle-income countries will receive the vaccine doses under the COVAX initiative. Moving to the other story, the UN humanitarian agency OCHA reports that the storm earlier hit Madagascar, where it killed one person and affected more than 1,000 people. The storm is expected to cause widespread flooding as it intensifies into a tropical cyclone. After hitting land, Eloise is forecast to lose strength as it travels inland to southern Zimbabwe, eastern South Africa, and eastern Botswana. 2 years ago, Cyclone Idai devastated Beira, displacing thousands of residents and killing over 1,000 people across Mozambique, Malawi, and Zimbabwe. Elsewhere, the World Health Organization says it has reached an agreement with Pfizer for 40 million doses of its vaccine against COVID-19. Poor and lower middle-income countries will receive the vaccine doses under the COVAX initiative starting February. The COVAX program is co-led by the World Health Organization and looks to ensure equitable distribution of COVID-19 vaccines. Well, it's time for us to take a look at the business headlines. Here's what's coming up. Annual inflation in Nigeria rose in December 2020 to the highest rate in 3 years. We have those details.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Let's start the business in Nigeria, where annual inflation in the country rose in December last year for the 16th straight month to the highest rate in 3 years. The rate climbed to 15.75% in the month as rising food costs lifted the price index. As CGTN's Phil Ihaza now explores from Abuja, Africa's most populous country is facing its worst economic crisis in decades, triggered by a coronavirus-induced crash in oil prices that has lowered state revenues, creating large financing needs and weakening the naira.
42 years old Abdul Idris sells foodstuffs at a local market on the outskirts of Abuja. He says business has been slow because customers are complaining that the items are too expensive.
Like rice, I sell 15 bags, 10 bags, even 20 bags in a day. But now, because of the increasement of the price of all this commodity, to sell one bag in a day now, the thing hard.
Nigeria is facing its highest rate of inflation in more than 3 years at 15.75%, according to the National Bureau of Statistics. The country's economy is also in a recession, and the value of the local currency, the naira, has dropped significantly against other foreign currencies like the United States dollar. As a result, the prices of most products, including food items imported into the country, are negatively affected.
During the Christmas period, things are always hiked, but this time around it was like ×3. There were things we used to buy. For instance, we used to buy a gallon of oil, but now we couldn't buy a gallon. We had to buy a smaller liter.
I've been in market now for like 1 hour plus now. Seriously, I can't really buy anything because price of things have increased. You understand what it takes. The one I have, I was able to buy just little.
I went there to buy yam, very high. I couldn't buy as much as I wanted to buy. I managed to buy just few tubers so that we can manage.
The average cost of a bag of rice is currently a little less than $100. This time last year, it was just over $50. Experts say this could push more people into poverty because the incomes of most Nigerians have not risen over that period. According to the World Bank, a further 7 million Nigerians may slip into poverty this year. Analysts say the government will need to cut down on taxes on food items as a way to reduce the inflation rate.
Government is increasing taxes virtually every day. Now, if you increase tax, what happened clearly is that the price of those items in the market also increased. The value of the tax was increased recently from 5% to 7.5% or so. And that means that is going to add to the price of those products in the marketplace. They can make sure that those products are not vatable. And that can also bring the inflation rate down.
President Muhammadu Buhari has instructed the Central Bank of Nigeria to also restrict food imports to reduce further strain on the naira and instead boost local farm production. The aim is to reduce inflation, ease the burden on consumers, and improve sales for the likes of Abdul. Phil Ihaza, CGTN, Abuja.
Britain's top diplomat has announced almost $55 million in aid to Sudan and around $455 million to clear its arrears to the African Development Bank. Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab arrived in Khartoum late Wednesday on the first visit by a British Foreign Secretary to the East African country in over a decade. Raab signed a memorandum of understanding with Sudan's finance minister, which provides for the disbursement of $54.9 million to the Sudan Family Support Program. At the meeting, the government officials discussed Sudan's economic reforms, recent border tensions with Ethiopia, which triggered deadly clashes in recent weeks, and Addis Ababa's controversial dam on the Blue Nile.
UK assistance to Sudan will be £125 million this financial year. UK programmes are helping to build the stability and support the establishment of a new parliament so that the people of Sudan have proper democratic accountability. And earlier today I signed a memorandum of understanding with Dr. Hiba, and it provides £40 million to the Sudan Family Support Program.
The government of Sudan had presented its position on the civilian protection program that started with the drawdown of UNIMED, leaving Darfur. Yes, it is true that we have very unfortunate incidents in Darfur since the announcement of the pullout of UNIMED. But then again, we had a few of these incidences when UNIMED was there as well.
To Zambia now, state mining investment arm Zambia Consolidated Copper Mines Limited has agreed to take on $1.5 billion in debt in exchange for full control of Mopani copper mines. The mine was previously owned by Glencore. The Swiss commodities trader and mining company sought to shut the mine last year due to COVID-19 disruptions and lower copper prices. Under the deal terms, Glencore will retain buying rights to Mopani's copper. ZCCM will repay the loan by giving Glencore creditors 3% of Mopani's gross revenue from 2021 to 2023 and between 10% to 17.5% of gross revenue from then on. The transaction is expected to go ahead within the next 3 months. Google's parent firm Alphabet has shelved plans to use a fleet of balloons to beam high-speed internet connectivity in remote parts of the world. The firm is winding down Loon, a 9-year-old project and 2.5-year-old spin-off firm. This is after failing to find a sustainable business model and partners for one of the most prominent projects. The demise of Loon comes a year after Android maker ended Google Station, its other major connectivity effort to bring internet to the next billion users. Just last year, Loon had secured approval from the government of Kenya to first launch balloons to provide commercial connectivity services, something it did successfully achieve months later, giving an impression that things were moving in the right direction. Now, a shutdown of the mining industry in South Africa would be a last resort in the country's battle against COVID-19. That is, according to analysts and industry players. South Africa reintroduced stricter lockdown measures in December. Those rules were extended earlier this month to include the closure of land borders until February the 15th, except for cargo and emergency travel. Angelo Coppola reports.
The latest lockdown hasn't affected the mining sector, and that's despite a big spike in infections and deaths in December and the early part of January. The sector has been actively managing the situation, and authorities appear comfortable with the actions taken.
I think it's highly unlikely that the government would shut down the mining sector. And I just think it would be shooting from the hip. And I think the fact that the president has been hesitant to move us to a level 4 or level 5, but has rather chosen to stay with level 3 with slightly more stringent regulations and curfew says to us that, they're not really keen to shut down the mining sector.
The mining sector contributes an estimated 7% to the country's GDP and employs 3% of the working population.
To shut it down in a time where already the economy is weak and a lot of people have lost their jobs would be tantamount to shooting an economic own goal, if one can say. And so if you look at the commodities that are important for South Africa, such as the PGMs, we're the biggest exporter of PGMs, and you look at other commodities that we mine, such as thermal coal, iron ore, manganese, and even gold. Commodity prices are currently at all-time highs, right? And so it doesn't make sense for us to shut down the economy when we could really use those export revenues and we could use those foreign currencies to come into the country.
In terms of managing and fighting the pandemic, the mining sector has led by example.
But I think what is interesting is last year, miners or employees would only get tested if they were showing symptoms of COVID. But now they're much more stringent about that. So every day, every shift, people are getting tested and they are making sure that there's protocols and controls in place to try and measure this thing.
The mining industry has shown even in high infection rates, it can operate, and it can operate fairly safely because it takes a holistic approach. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
And staying in the country, the South African Reserve Bank's Monetary Policy Committee held its first meeting for the year this week and decided to keep rates unchanged. The bank cut rates 5 times in 2020 in an effort to support the economy during a hard lockdown. The repo rate remains at 3.5%, while prime lending for consumers is at 7%. South Africans are being cautioned to take advantage of this relief before rates go up again. Sumitra Naidu now reports.
The Reserve Bank seems satisfied with its monetary policy thus far. The recent rate cuts helped ease financial conditions and improved the resilience of households and firms to the impacts of COVID-19.
A lot of consumers took advantage of the lower interest rates. A lot of consumers took mortgages, which was about 279%, meaning a lot of consumers bought new houses or they accessed a loan in their own existing houses during that period. And also vehicle financing increased a lot in Q3 by 110%, which equals about 43 billion in a quarter.
With inflation in check and the global economy showing signs of a recovery, the bank decided to keep rates on hold. Some economists still believe there's room for further cuts, but the governor noted that there's still much uncertainty with new waves of COVID sweeping across the world. Further rate cuts will also make South Africa less attractive for investment.
They've done quite a bit to ease the interest rate pressure. And the second is in the short term, there are some significant risks which they need to be more sure about. The one is what happens to the second wave of COVID and how damaging does that become? And do they need to provide stimulus further down the line? And they may want to have some potential rate cuts in reserve in order to do that. The second is that obviously the latest lockdown is going to put the government finances under more pressure. And clearly under those circumstances, they'd be worried about our ability to attract foreign investment into this country.
For now, inflation is still hovering just above 3%, but will start pushing towards the 4% mark. Consumers are being urged to clear debt before rates start going up.
That they also tweaked the CPI forecast slightly upwards for 2021 from previously expected 3.9% to 4%, and they flagged some risks on higher food prices, higher oil price and so forth. The quarterly prediction model that the Reserve Bank used as a guideline is actually indicating 2 interest rate hikes during the course of 2021.
The Reserve Bank revised its growth target higher for this year. It's now expecting GDP to come in at 3.5%. The bank also foresees 2 rate hikes this year as early as the second quarter. This means that South African consumers only have a short time left to enjoy these low rates. Sumitra Naidu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
US President Joe Biden has rolled out plans to get the economy back on its feet. On his second full day in office, he signed orders to help small businesses and the unemployed. Nathan King has more.
The theme of this week from Joe Biden's first few days in the presidency has been the health. First it was the health of American democracy, not good. Then it was the health of the American people with COVID-19, not good. And essentially, in the final day of this week, it's been the health of the American economy, and he thinks that's not good either. In a series of executive orders, he is basically saying that to poor Americans, help is on the way. He is using his powers as president to give more money for poor families, for food stamps, for example. 1 in 5 African Americans and people of color in this country have problems putting food on the table. 1 in 7 of the regular population. Also among this executive order, he is making it easier for people to turn down jobs if they feel that they are threatened by COVID, or leave jobs if they feel that they're threatened by COVID, and claim unemployment benefit as well. This is not to be confused with the $1.9 trillion relief package that he's trying to get through Congress over the next few weeks. But he says, listen, when it comes to economic suffering, it's not Democrats and Republicans, it's the whole American people. Let's take a listen.
We cannot, will not let people go hungry. We cannot let people be evicted because of nothing they did themselves. They cannot watch people lose their jobs, and we have to act. We have to act now.
And the Biden administration got a shot in the arm as well with the confirmation of Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin. Of course, he makes history, becoming the first African American to hold the top post at the Pentagon, and others will follow. Janet Yellen voted out of committee. We know her. She's going to be the first female Treasury Secretary after being at the Federal Reserve. There's a lot of focus on the economy, on COVID. This White House wants to prove that they are hitting the ground running despite the pandemic, the painful transition in terms of Donald Trump, and also reaching out to foreign leaders. Usually it starts with their northern neighbor, Canada. Justin Trudeau first on that list, and even though he may be having a sigh of relief, Justin Trudeau, after the difficulties of the Trump presidency, the cancellation of the Keystone XL pipeline, which transfers energy from Canada to the US, will cost jobs and cause problems in the relationship. But Justin Trudeau said they can work on other things.
It's not always going to be perfect alignment with the United States. That's the case with any given president. But in a situation where we are much more aligned on values, on focus, on the work that needs to be done to give opportunities for everyone while we build a better future, I'm very much looking forward to working with President Biden.
There'll be many other calls with foreign leaders going forward as well. For someone who has been assumed this office as the oldest president in the United States, there's an energy there. It's not just him, it's his whole administration. They want to hit the ground running. They've reversed many Trump decisions within 48 hours, and they plan to do the same. But they have to cooperate with a divided country, a divided Congress. Let's see what happens. Nathan King, CGTN at the White House.
And here's what's coming up in the sport.